The gunshots carried across the valley like iron bells, echoing off the frozen slopes. At first I thought they were no more than the cracking of ice, but then I heard the distinct rhythm of rifle fire. 3 shots close together, followed by silence so deep it seemed to crawl under my skin. The kind of silence that told you men had been near, and men with guns. Out here in Montana territory, even the quietest nights weren't safe. I held my breath by the window. My lantern dimmed low, watching the ridgeline beyond my corral. The sky was an angry quilt of clouds, the moon swallowed whole, the wind dragging its teeth through the pines. Wolves had been prowling for weeks now, lean with hunger, and I knew they'd come down closer tonight. My cattle stamped nervously, hooves crunching in the snow. I had no choice. I reached for the Winchester, leaning by the door. The same one Robert had carried before his lungs gave out 3 winters back, pushed into the storm. The cold bit my face like needles. My breath rose in pale clouds as I leveled the rifle toward the shadows near the barn. The low growls came first, then the glint of eyes. Wolves, 6 of them, circling with bold hunger. My fingers squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, echoing into the dark. They scattered, yelping, but not far. Another growl, another flash of teeth, and I fired again, the recoil jarring through my arm. Finally, they slunk back into the trees, tails low, but I knew they'd return. They always did. By the time I stumbled back into the cabin, my knees felt weak, my chest hollow. I set the rifle down, closed the door against the wind, and whispered a prayer I hadn't spoken since the day we laid Robert into the frozen earth. Lord, keep me through this night. That's when I heard it. Not a wolf, not the groan of timber, but the dragging crunch of boots across the snow. Slow, stumbling, heavier with each step. My hand went straight to the rifle again. Nobody traveled through storms like this unless they were desperate or dangerous. I opened the door just as the figure collapsed onto my porch. A man, tall, broad, face shadowed by a battered hat slumping into the snow. I gasped, torn between fear and instinct. He was breathing barely. His coat was soaked dark down the side, blood already stiff with ice. I should have shut the door. God help me, I thought of it. A woman alone has no business letting strangers in, not men bleeding from fresh wounds. But his hand twitched, reaching weakly, and something in me cracked. Before I could stop myself, I hauled him across the threshold, boots dragging heavy, his weight near too much for me. Somehow, I got him to the hearth, where the flames licked low. He groaned when I stripped back the coat. The wound was a long slash across his ribs, torn and raw. A bullet had grazed him, close enough to kill if infection set in. My stomach knotted, but my hands moved anyway. I fetched clean rags, water I'd melted earlier, and whiskey I'd been saving. I pressed cloth to the wound, ignoring his low hiss of pain. When his eyes opened, they stopped me cold. Blue, sharp as ice on the river, rimmed with shadows. They locked onto mine with a feral intensity that made my breath stumble. His hand jerked toward his side, reaching for a pistol that wasn't there. Easy, I whispered, though my own voice shook. You're safe here. For now, he studied me, suspicion etched into every line of his scarred face. Then his head sagged back against the wall. Exhaustion winning. Whiskey, he croaked. I hesitated, then fetched the last of the bottle. He drank like a man used to pain, every swallow tight with grit. When he handed it back, his fingers brushed mine rough, calloused, trembling. My stomach tightened, and I turned away quickly. Your horse? I asked. Barn, he muttered. Legs gone bad. Won't last the week. I should have left it. But later, lantern in hand. I trudged to the barn and found the poor beast trembling on 3 legs, ribs jutting sharp beneath its hide. I fed it hay, stroked its muzzle. At least one of you won't die on my watch, I murmured. Back inside, the man slept fitfully by the fire, shadows playing across his face. His chest was a map of scars, old wounds that told of a life carved by violence. Something stirred in me as I looked at him, a flicker I hadn't felt since Robert's laughter filled these walls. I turned away, ashamed of myself. This was no place for yearning. Not anymore. But then he muttered in his sleep, words so soft I almost missed them. Samuel Hayes. The breath left my body. My knees weakened. My son's name spoken in the voice of a stranger. I leaned close. Sure, I'd misheard. But he said it again, clearer this time. Samuel, my boy. I shook him awake. Harder than I meant to. What did you say? My voice cracked. Say that name again? His eyes opened, hazy, but alert. Samuel, he rasped. Samuel Hayes. I knew him. I staggered back, rifle clattering from my lap. You knew my son? Recognition flickered across his face. His jaw tightened. Nevada. Mining camps. We worked the same claim. My heart lurched between hope and terror. He's alive? His gaze dropped to the fire. Last I saw? Yes. But he was in trouble. Men came in the night. Guns. We were scattered. I barely got out. My tears fell hot and helpless. For 2 years, I'd heard nothing. Only silence where letters should have been. To know he still lived or had lived shook me to the bone. You dragged him into ruin, I spat. His head snapped up. Anger flashing in those ice-blue eyes. No. He chose it. Chased silver with fire in his belly. I tried to keep him clear of the worst. But trouble follows me, and his voice broke off. He didn't deserve the weight of my sins. I wanted to hate him, to throw him back into the storm. But he was the first soul in years to speak Samuel's name aloud. My heart twisted, torn between fury and desperate need. Before I could speak again, hoofbeats shattered the night. The man he hadn't told me his name yet. But I would come to know him as Caleb Mercer went rigid. His hand reached instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. They've found me, he whispered. I shoved aside the rug, pried up the floorboards and hissed. Go, now, he hesitated, pride flaring. But the pounding at the door left no time. He lowered himself into the hollow, and I covered it just as fists rattled the cabin walls. Open up, a man's voice barked. I wiped my palms on my apron, forced my face into calm, and opened the door to the storm. 3 riders loomed, snow crusting their coats, eyes sharp as daggers. Evenin', ma'am, one drawled. We're lookin' for a man. Tall, scarred, rides a lame horse. Might have come this way? My heart hammered so loud I feared they'd hear it. But I smiled thinly. Ain't seen nobody. Just me and the wolves. The man studied me a long moment, spit into the snow, then tipped his hat. If he comes by, you best tell us. He's dangerous. They turned hooves, thundering away into the storm. I closed the door, my body shaking so hard I thought my bones might shatter. From beneath the boards came a whisper. Thank you. I sank to the floor, breath ragged. I should have thrown him out, but I hadn't. And now, everything my grief, my fear. My loneliness was tangled up with this wounded stranger, whether I liked it or not. That night, I poured 2 cups of whiskey, though my hands trembled. He emerged from hiding, pale but alive, eyes shadowed with guilt. We sat by the fire, the storm raging outside, words spilling slow and halting. My husband, I confessed, staring into the flames. Robert, he was steady, safe, but he's gone. I've been empty since. Caleb's gaze softened. I had a wife once. Fever took her. Texas left me hollow. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It thrummed with something dangerous, something alive. When his hand brushed mine, the spark jolted through me like lightning. I jerked back, heart pounding. We mustn't, I whispered. My voice barely a breath. His jaw tightened, but he didn't press. Instead, he leaned back, shadows cutting his face in half, and let the storm fill the silence. But I couldn't close my eyes. Not with him breathing across from me, not with the heat of his gaze lingering like a touch. For the first time in years, I felt alive, and it terrified me. The storm had eased by morning, but the air outside carried a strange stillness, like the valley itself was holding its breath. I stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, my eyes searching the horizon for riders. No sign of them. Only the white silence of snow, deep and unbroken. Caleb joined me, his shirt loose around the fresh bandage I'd tied. He moved like every step was pain, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the tree line. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "Men like that don't let go easy." I wanted to tell him to leave, to take his trouble and go. But when I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come. I saw the frost clinging to his lashes, the scars etched across his chest. And all I could think of was Samuel's name falling from his lips in the dark. That afternoon, the danger returned. It wasn't hoofbeats this time, but smoke. My barn was on fire, flames roaring bright against the snow. I ran with a bucket, but Caleb was already there, yanking the doors open as cattle bellowed inside. Heat seared my face as he shouted for me to stand back. Shots cracked through the Hayes raiders hidden in the trees, firing as the fire raged. My hands didn't shake this time. I leveled the Winchester, squeezed the trigger, and saw a man tumble into the snow. Caleb's revolver barked beside me. The two of us shoulder to shoulder, smoke stinging our throats. Wolves howling at the edge of the blaze as if hell itself had risen, when at last the flames were beaten back. My cattle saved, and the men driven off bleeding into the night. I dropped to my knees in the snow. My body shook with exhaustion, with terror, with something else I couldn't name. Caleb knelt too, his hand steady on my shoulder. Our eyes met, and there it was, that pull, fierce and undeniable. Later, inside I cleaned his wound again, my fingers lingering longer than they should. The fire cracked, shadows dancing across his face, across mine. His hand rose, brushed against mine. And I didn't pull away this time. "We mustn't," I whispered again. Though my lips trembled with the lie, he leaned closer, his voice low as a promise. "Then why does it feel like we already have?" The storm outside raged again, but inside my cabin the silence grew hot, charged, alive. For the first time in 3 winters, I no longer felt alone, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. I had thought the barn fire and the raiders would be the worst of it, but the days that followed proved me wrong. The valley seemed to shift around me once Caleb Mercer stepped into my life, as if every breath of wind carried menace. Every shadow hinted at the edge of a gun barrel. We had collapsed together that night after fighting off the wolves. The smell of blood and smoke clung to us, our bodies trembling from exhaustion. Yet when his arms closed around me, fear gave way to something else. His lips brushed mine, tentative at first, and I should have turned away. I didn't. The hunger that had been gnawing at me for years burst free. And we kissed with a desperation that belonged to the half-dead who had found life again. "We mustn't," I whispered. But even as the word left my lips, I felt it unravel. He kissed me harder, his hands rough but reverent. And the two of us gave in to what we'd been circling since the moment he collapsed on my porch. By the firelight, wild and tender, fierce and aching, we clung to each other as though survival itself depended on it. For 2 broken souls, it did. In the stillness after, his chest beneath my cheek, I whispered into the hollow of his collarbone, "I can't go back to emptiness." He kissed my hair, but his silence spoke more than words. The next morning, trouble rode in. I saw the glint first, sun-catching metal down the slope. 3 men, broad-shouldered, rifles slung, moving with the confidence of hunters. But these weren't raiders. Their coats bore the long dust of travel, their saddlebags heavy, their eyes scanning the land with practiced care. Bounty hunters. Caleb stiffened beside me at the window. "They're here for me," he said flatly. "Always will be." I lived by the gun too long to expect peace. Why? My voice was sharper than I intended. Why drag that to my door? "Because I had nowhere else to go," he said, eyes never leaving the riders. "And because of your son, I owe him more than I can pay." I hated that his words made sense. I hated that the sight of those men struck fear into me. The thought of losing Caleb struck deeper. We hid him again. Beneath the floorboards, while I stepped out to meet the men. Their leader, a tall one with a scar across his jaw, doffed his hat politely enough. "Ma'am, we're tracking a man. Caleb Mercer. Half-breed, scarred up, carries a revolver too quick for his own good. Heard he might be in these parts." I kept my face steady, though. My palms itched with sweat. "I haven't seen a soul in weeks," I lied. His eyes narrowed, sweeping past me toward the cabin, toward the smoke curling from the chimney. For a breath, I thought he'd push inside. But then he smiled thinly, tipped his hat again, and rode on. I stood there until they vanished down the ridge, only then letting my knees shake. Caleb emerged from hiding, his face lined with guilt. "You should have given me up," he said. I spun on him, fury igniting. "And let them drag you out and hang you in the snow." "You think I could stand by and watch that after?" The words caught in my throat. Shame and longing tangled together. "After what?" he asked softly. I couldn't answer. We spoke little the rest of that day. But I felt him near, his presence filling corners of my cabin that had long been empty. A week later, I went to town for supplies. Snow had thawed just enough to make the roads treacherous with ice. I hitched my sled and rode in, wary of the gossip that always followed a woman alone. At the Mercantile, I caught sight of old Mrs. Talbot, watching me with hawk's eyes, whispering to the storekeep. My hands tightened around the sack of flour. Already the neighbors suspected. A widow with too much firewood cut, too much meat in her stores. Surely someone was helping her. On the way back, I learned how dangerous suspicion could be. I'd just crossed the frozen bend in the river when a man stepped out from the trees, blocking my path. His face was familiar, one of the raiders from before. His grin was cold as the ice beneath my sled. "Afternoon, Mrs. Hayes," he drawled. "We've been wondering if you might be keeping company with a certain fellow. Tall, scarred, quick with a gun." My heart lurched, but I kept my voice steady. "I don't know the man." His grin widened. "That's so? Shame if someone were to burn your house down again, just to make sure." I reached for the rifle strapped to the sled. But before I could lift it, a shout rang out. Caleb charged from the trees like a storm given flesh, his revolver flashing. The raider lunged at me, knife drawn, but Caleb slammed into him, the two of them crashing to the snow. Blood sprayed as the knife cut shallow across Caleb's arm. They grappled, fists and blades flashing, the air thick with curses and the crack of blows. I didn't hesitate. Grabbing my rifle, I swung it hard, the butt striking the raider's jaw with a sickening crack. He collapsed into the snow, blood bubbling from his mouth. Caleb staggered up, breath ragged, eyes wild. "You should have stayed hidden," I gasped, "and leave you to him?" His voice was raw. "Never." We dragged the man's body into the trees, leaving him for the wolves. My hand shook the whole ride home, but Caleb's hand covered mine on the reins, steady and warm. For once I let myself lean into him. The winter deepened. The days blurred. Danger always near. Yet in the quiet hours by the fire, something stronger bound us. He admired my stubborn will, my strength to endure. I saw in him not just the outlaw, but the man broken by loss. Searching for redemption he didn't believe he deserved. Then came the river. The ice had thickened again, but not enough. Caleb insisted on checking the line of traps across the far side. I went with him, though every step felt cursed. Halfway across, the ice cracked. His horse reared, plunging into the black water. Caleb went with it, vanishing beneath. I screamed his name, dropped to my stomach, and reached as the river swallowed him. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a hand broke the surface, clawing for air. I lunged, grabbing hold, pulling with all the strength I had. The ice burned my chest, my arms screamed, but I dragged him free, coughing and sputtering onto the bank. His body shivered violently, lips blue, eyes fluttering. "Don't you dare die on me," I cried, pounding his chest, pressing my cheek to his frozen lips. "Not you. Not now." He opened his eyes, faint smile trembling. "You're stronger than both of us, Eleanor." I wrapped him in every blanket I had. built a fire on the riverbank, and held him through the night until the shivers eased. My tears soaked into his shoulder, though I never admitted them aloud. By the time spring thawed the valley, the snow melting into rushing streams, the storm inside me had only deepened. Caleb spoke often of Samuel, how proud he'd been, how fierce, how stubborn. Each word was a knife and a bomb all at once. Then one morning, as the last frost broke, Caleb saddled his half-lame horse. His face was set, his eyes shadowed. "I have to find him," he said. "Your son. He deserves to know your love. Even if he never comes home." I wanted to beg him to stay, to let me keep this fragile piece of life we'd found. But I saw the truth in him. He could no more stay than the river could stop running. "Don't make promises," I whispered. "Just live. That's enough." He kissed me once, slow and aching, and then he was gone. Weeks later, the letter arrived. Sacramento Sheriff. Samuel Hayes had died in a mine collapse. With the letter came a small pouch of silver dust, and a note written in Caleb's rough hand. "Eleanor, he never stopped speaking of you. He carried your name like a prayer. He wanted you to have this. And know this, too, I loved you. For 2 nights, you gave me back my soul." I pressed the letter to my heart, tears carving paths down my cheeks. Samuel was gone, but through Caleb's words I felt his voice again. I used the silver to buy a small place in town, where winter couldn't crush me alone. And sometimes, when the wind rattled the shutters and the night carried the faint echo of hooves, I swore I could still feel Caleb Mercer near. A restless cowboy, my son's friend, the man who taught me that even in a world built on loss, the heart can burn bright again if only for a moment.